market. If classical music regularly accounts for 7 or 8% of all records sold in Britain, back in 1973, Roxy Music and BRYAN FERRY must have accounted for at least a measurable percentage. 3 albums in 1 year, 2 from Roxy and BRYAN's debut solo album. Through the decade of the 70s, Roxy Music managed to walk the thin line that separates fashion from fad. They're now one of the most revered British groups of that decade. They managed to survive a 3-year gap and came back strong in the early 80s. For BRYAN FERRY as a solo artist, it's been 7 years between discs. Why has it taken so long? Why 3 years since the Roxy Music Avalon album?
I find that I always need to kind of escape from music for a while after a long bout of touring to kind of recharge the batteries and stuff. Otherwise, the whole process of making music becomes too automatic, you know.
Do you find it's easier to make a new record as one person than a group?
No, I wouldn't say it was easier. It's different in as much as you have a kind of more or less infinite roster of musicians that you can work with, which is a kind of very fortunate position to be in. But sometimes it makes it difficult in as much as you're moving from one country to another so you can work with Mr. X or whatever. And so logistically it becomes kind of difficult.
Did you feel a sense of shared enthusiasm at the very beginning of Roxy Music?
Oh yeah, you do. You know, when you're trying to make your mark initially, it's a very exciting time, and usually you're kind of poor and you're living in everybody else's pockets, and yeah, it's very much a shared thing. And it's a very exciting time, but you can't really live like that all the time, you know. Obviously you change, and your music, I guess, has to change a bit with you too.
If we may look back at that first record and Virginia Plain, the first single, you're more censorious now. You take care at what you let out and what you don't.
Yeah.
At that time...
I think people expect that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
At the time, at the beginning, did you just want to get it all out there and not really inhibit yourself so much?
Oh, sure, because, I mean, I remember doing 2 and...
expecting anything, of course,
yeah.
And there you suddenly arrived with not just Andy and Phil and Brian Eno and the others, but also, of course, with the team that went into the appearance of it all, with Nick DeVille and Anthony Price,
right.
Of course, doing the costuming.
Yeah.
How did you sit around and decide those early album covers?
I think we just sort of argued a lot. I would... and Anthony was very important, obviously. And still is involved, you know. I don't know, really. I'd sort of maybe have an idea or a bee in my bonnet about a certain kind of icon or something. For instance, with the first cover, I wanted to do something which was like a cheesecake advertising image, like the sort of pin-up girl that had been used in America a lot, say through advertising motor cars or Pepsi-Cola, or, you know, just a sort of standard pin-up thing.
There was a year when you did 3 albums. That was 1973. I don't know what brand you're smoking now, but isn't it true that Do the Strand, which was from For Your Pleasure in that year, was actually named after the cigarette and not the street?
Yeah, it was a combination job, as usual with lyrics. It used to try to be clever and rope in as many references as possible, but that was a great image and a great advertising campaign, that whole Do the Strand and the guy with the trench coat on the bridge or whatever. Yeah.
And yet...
One of the best records as well, I think, that we ever made, I thought.
There's a new sensation, a fabulous creation.
You know, the most exciting part of it, or should be, is the 1 hour or so on stage, you know, that evening. The rest of the day is traveling, and it really is awful. And to try and make the whole thing more of an escape, more of a fantasy, and more bearable, yeah, we used to kind of dress up. And, yes, it was kind of, it made the thing much more interesting for us to do all that, you know. But I guess it lost us some kind of credibility, I think. You know, for a few years, people really wouldn't I think, take the music that seriously or whatever. Maybe they still shouldn't. But it used to be a matter of some concern to us, I think.
Well, it was the glam rock era,
Mm.
73, 74. The fact that you lasted was a testimony to your playing and singing skills. But
Dogged determination.
but let's face it, a lot of people who were dressed flashily did not last
Mm.
that time. Your one touted mistake, let's see if you agree, was when you did the gaucho routine.
It was about 10 years ahead of its time. I curse Anthony to this day for that.
And yet the great success was probably when you put on the dinner jacket.
Mm.
It fit, didn't it?
Yeah, it was another uniform, of course, and they were all kind of uniforms, you know, and that was a sort of Cunard cruise type look. It was very much a kind of standard uniform thing, you know, that people wear, you know, and it was so successful that it became a bit of an image prison, actually, you know, and sometimes it's very hard to break out of something if it is so right.
You yourself made early promotional films, really, when especially you released your first solo album, These Foolish Things. You made films, I believe, for both The Hard Rains Are Gonna Fall and the title track.
Right, yeah, we did them both in one afternoon. It's actually in the Roundhouse in London. And those are the days. It was just very straightforward, very simple, and you know, once again, fun ending ourselves in those days.
And enjoying making the films rather
Yeah.
than considering it a chore.
Yeah. And one of the best ones we did was before that even, in 72, which was the remake remodel track from the first Roxy Music album. We did that at the Royal College of Art Film School. And it was one of the nicest ones to this day, I think, that we ever did.
What made that one work?
I don't know, just the fact that, I don't know, it was a video thing as opposed to on film, and looked very kind of modern, you know. I suppose the costumes helped a lot, yeah, and just the whole look of it was quite new looking, and still looks kind of extraordinary enough, you know, to be interesting.
A band for two non-musicians. Do you think that's a fair way of putting it?
Up to a point. I think it got to a stage where I think Brian wanted to do more things as you know, as he became more interested in the idea of playing. Because at the beginning of Roxy, he'd been sort of mixing the sound and then treating the instruments that the other people were playing, you know, through his synthesizer. And I guess it was time for him to sort of move on in a way, because he was too constricted within the group. It's what he could do. And it proved to be the right thing for him and for everyone, actually.